Welcome in to the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It is Friday afternoon, and we figure let's get you into the weekend thinking about something other than the basketball transfer portal. I know that's what is on everybody's mind right now, but we haven't done a football podcast in a little bit. We've seen a little bit of spring ball. We've talked a lot with the coaches and players. So Joey Wagner and I figure we give the podcast over to you guys in a football aspect. So I'm sure people are going to come into this live YouTube podcast show and want to talk Illini basketball because Josh Dix is off to Creighton. The good news is he's not going to Iowa. He's not going to Indiana. And we'll see what happens with Jalen Sellers and the transfer portal with Illinois basketball. But can this be a safe place? Can we be just Illinois football here, Joey, for the next hour?
I think you and I can. I get it. Like this, and there's new faces you're bringing in. There's frustration. There's anxiety. There's all of those emotions because people want to see their basketball program stay at the level or move up the level that it's been at. It is the transfer portal message board is not for the weak, Jeremy. There are a lot of emotions. There are a lot of questions, which I understand, all of those things. So maybe we can keep this as a football space until St. Dom gets here.
It is not for the weak. It is not for the impatient. And I would just say, like, hey, if you want to be upset, Josh Dix goes elsewhere. If Jalen Sellers goes elsewhere and you want to be upset, that's fine. You can be upset because you missed on targets. Kansas is missing on a lot of targets here too, and Indiana missed on Josh Dix as well, and they got a lot of money to spend and have a big connection to him. These are all really desirable players. I would just go back to a year ago. You're stressing out at this time of year as they missed on some targets 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I mean, Terrence Shannon took a while to get here. Matthew Meyer took a while to get here. Will Riley, Kasper Shakashonis, Tomislav Ivicic. It goes on and on. Like, this staff has connections. They find a way to get good players. And I just give them the benefit of the doubt. In 2 months or at the end of May, Joey, we look back and we feel like Illinois' roster isn't good enough. We can dive into the panic if people want. I'm not there yet just because of what we've seen the last 2 years with the staff and their ability to put together rosters. Ivicic, Tomislav is a huge one for them just to get back, and we'll see what happens there. Will Riley, can they throw a bunch of money at him and expect him to come back? But I think they'll go get talent. I think Illinois is a desirable place. They have a big budget, but other schools have big budgets too. And I think what we're finding is some of these Big East schools have some really big budgets now with not having to share revenue sharing in the future with football. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. The roller coaster is in full effect right now, though, of the transfer portal. It's what we've experienced the last few years.
Yeah, and again, usually at the end of May, things look like the roster makes sense. Not everyone hits. We've seen that where players don't hit it the way that Brad Underwood and his coaching staff thought they would, and we don't know that until November. But I get it. Like I really do, especially when you see other programs start to load up and it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Where's Illinois' commit? We'll see what happens. Like, I know no one wants to hear that either, right? Like, no one wants to hear, well, wait it out, see how it goes. And everyone wants the latest buzz. And shout out real quick to our guy, Derek Piper. This is a lot. And he could have, like, every time he posts on the board, and if you don't subscribe, please do, because he's got a lot of nuggets and info he throws out there. It reminds me of, like, when you see, like, the presidential media scrums and, like, they're walking to, like, the air, like, Mr. President, what about, and, like, people are really interested and good, right? I mean, interest is what drives it and probably what gives Illinois a budget and all of those above things. But shout out to Derek, man. He's doing a lot of lifting on this stuff, and there's a lot of sentences and words thrown at him. You got to kind of see what's real, what's not. So he's our guy, man, and he's crushing it.
No, he's doing great, sifting through it. And it's stressful because the demand for news is huge, and he scrapes and claws for a lot of information, sifts through it, and tries to tell what is real, what is not, through many, many different kind of avenues here. So he's been on top of it. So take it easy on him, but he's doing great work. He's been all over this stuff. So check that out at IlliniInquirer.com. That's enough basketball talk. Let's
move on, man.
Talk about spring football, because I'm really excited about this because we have been so basketball focused on this podcast. And I talked to you yesterday. I'm like, I want to do a spring football thing. We did a storylines. We had Bielema on this podcast. But I'm like, should we just make it a mailbag? Like, let the people decide what we want to talk about on here. And you're like, yes, that's a good idea. So that's what we're doing, Joey. We're throwing it to the people because sometimes we overlook some of the things that are right in front of our faces. So I always like throwing it to the people, and we got like 10, 15 really good questions here.
I scrolled through some of them and I was like, I don't really do a ton of preparation, which I probably shouldn't say out loud. But this morning, I was having a coffee and scrolling through. I thought, oh man, I really should have looked at these yesterday to see what was going on to give the best answers. They were good questions. And like you said, you get so used to seeing or hearing certain things. It's nice to have someone else be like, hey, what's going on here? Like, what do you see out of this? And helps us think in different ways. That's why we like the post-game pods as much as we do.
All right, let's dive into them. Austin starts us off with the question, is the two deep good enough to compete for the Big Ten crown this year? And is Vegas grossly undervaluing the Illini at an over-under of 7.5 wins? So let's start there, Joey. Yeah. Is the two deep good enough to compete for the Big Ten title this year?
The two deep is good. The top of the Big Ten is really good. I mean, can Illinois be that third or fourth team? Probably. I mean, the schedule looks like there's going to be opportunity, but it's just still hard for me to wrap my brain around competing and, being in that conversation with Ohio State, with Oregon, with Penn State's going to be, they bring back Drew Alley, though I would say Illinois bringing back Luke Altmaier is a pretty big deal and maybe more significant than that. I feel like saying no just ignores probably a lot of nuance because I do like the two deep, but man, the top of the Big Ten is good.
Yeah, that's my thing. Like, is it good enough to win the Big Ten? I wouldn't say yes yet. Is it good enough to compete? Well, is compete top five? I think Illinois is good enough to be top five in the Big Ten this year, given the experience. And the one thing that has shined to me, Joey, in this spring ball, at most positions, I wouldn't say every position, but at most positions is the depth is way better. Like I look at wide receiver and I go, I'd be comfortable with 5 or 6 guys starting a Big Ten game. Like you can go compete with those guys. Quarterback, do I feel that? Probably not. Offensive line, do I feel that? Probably not. But I do feel good about my first groups there. And I don't know how many teams feel great about quarterback after your first one. Defense, everywhere in defense, I feel pretty good. Like I feel like that is the deepest defensive roster they have had. And that is saying a lot given what 2022 was, but 2022 was, I thought, very top heavy. It was stronger, I thought, 2022 talent-wise than what this season is. But I think this team has more depth on the defensive line. Like I feel like you can have actually a 6-man rotation on the defensive line. I feel like you have 3 starting caliber outside linebackers with a couple speed rushers and Joe Barna who can rotate in and be effective. Linebacker, you got to feel pretty good about the depth. And then defensive back, I think that's as strong and as deep a position on this roster. So, Penn State's going to be really good. They return a lot. I know they lose some, especially with their superstar Abdul Carter, but they return a lot of that offensive roster. I mean,
running backs.
Yeah, Tyler Warren gone too. But they are loaded. Ohio State's going to be loaded. Even though there's a big question at quarterback for Ohio State and Oregon, that's just another caliber of talent at the top of this. But experience and depth, I feel like Illinois can be that Iowa this year where they're kind of that dark horse, maybe nationally, but just being solid, consistent. And let's be honest, the schedule sets them up to have a good year. So long-winded way to say, can they compete? Can they be in that mix in the last couple weeks? Can they be in the mix for a Big Ten title game? Yeah, I think that can be the case. Are they the team that I think is going to win it? No.
That is exactly where, as you were talking, I was trying to figure out how to frame it. I don't think they're going to win the Big Ten, right? I mean, let's just be real here. But is there a path with 2 or 3 games left where all of a sudden I call it the magic number in baseball, right? Where all of a sudden, here's Illinois' path to win the Big Ten, and it's not easy, and you need some help, but it's still like there's a road there. I think that can happen. I think you could be in those final weeks, and Illinois being one of those 4-5 teams that has a legitimate numerical road to get there. I just don't think it's going to happen. Now, you don't have to win the Big Ten to be in the playoff. And I think that is where we need to circle, be that 4th Big Ten team, and you're probably playing a playoff game.
Yes.
That is very much on the table. And I think that steam and that's the speed of that conversation is going to pick up in late July, early August for Illinois and the way people think about them, because you're seeing it thrown out there now.
That's got to be the goal. Get to the playoff, because that is an unbelievably successful year. Austin's second question, is Vegas grossly undervaluing the Illini at an over-under of 7.5 wins? to be honest with you, Joey, that number to me is the number for like, is this a good year for Illinois? Like if you go over 7.5, to me, even though I know your sights are set higher, you are set for college football playoff. You would love to be in a Big Ten championship game. And I think those things aren't unrealistic for Illinois. But for this program, if you can get another 8-win year, like, and have a winning season and have NFL draft success, which they will, yeah, maybe in, the greatest outcomes, like that's not what Illinois should want this year. But I still think that would be a successful season for the history of this program. You wouldn't be maximizing what I think you have coming back this year. But I think you also got to look at last year and say, they won a lot of close games. They won some games that like the odds say they wouldn't or shouldn't have won. The Rutgers game, the comeback there, and Purdue game, the comeback there. Like those are really razor thin margins. Are you going to have as much luck this season of doing that? You hope you can get out to leads and just wear teams out in the running game and the defense this year, and you can win games in a different way. But you do lose some talent, and maybe you just don't win on those margins like you did last year.
Yeah, I think it's undervalued because I think you could talk me into taking the over at 8.5. Like I wouldn't bat an eye at that. I don't think it's like grossly some like insult to the program to be at 7.5 for all the reasons you mentioned. I love what they have coming back. And I think Luke Altmaier is really stinking good. When you've got a quarterback who's really stinking good, I'm very high on what you can do because Luke made plays that really probably had no business making at times last season. Pat Bryant helped a great deal with that, and they'll be missing him. But give me the quarterback, and that's worth a pretty good amount of wins for me. And then you look at everything else they have coming back, especially in that secondary. I'm really, really high on what the Illinois secondary can be. I know there's a question, Jeremy, coming up on that here shortly, but I don't think it's super low, but it's not where Illinois wants to be. Illinois wants to be above 8.5, wants to be above 9.5. And if you do those things, then that playoff talk, it gets a heck of a lot louder.
Yeah, I don't know if it's grossly undervaluing because Iowa's
definitely undervaluing, right? I mean, in some way it's undervalued, but maybe like a game or two, right? It's not like they're setting the line at 5.5.
Yeah, I don't think it's grossly undervaluing it because, listen, I know Ohio State, everyone's going to chalk up is a loss there. Duke's a tough road game, right? You got Washington on the road going up against Ryan Wall. Like it's just the Big Ten. The Big Ten is really difficult when you add Duke to it. Those are really 10 games that Illinois could win or lose depending on how you feel about certain things. Like I think they should crush Purdue this year. I like them over Maryland. I like them over Rutgers, but there's not a lot of just no doubt easy wins. So I think there's going to be a lot of close games. I just think if you look at Illinois has won close games the last couple of years. That is a skill. Part of it's the quarterback, right? And I agree with that. Like your quarterback makes up for a lot of other flaws, and there's not a ton of flaws on this roster. But you also lost Pat Bryant, a stud receiver who changed games, who won games for you in this season. So I don't think it's unfair. Yeah, I would think about going over 8.5 though. Like to your point, I would think about going over 8, 9.5. No, that's too high of a number for me. So I think 7.5 is a good number just to say like what the expectation, like what would qualify as a good season in my thought for Illinois football. So you have another 8-4, 9-3 season. I still think that's good, even if you don't ultimately maximize what I think the ceiling of this team, which I think is 10+ in a college football playoff.
Yeah, 100% with you. You said it 7.5 and take over. I think 8 wins is a good season for Illinois football, right? You put it at 8.5, I would still have to really think about it. 9.5, I wouldn't. Illinois wants to be over 9.5, of course. Like come on, everyone does. I think there's talent returning to where people could reasonably drink some orange and blue Kool-Aid and jump on board with that. But 7.5 is fine. It is a little low to me by one game, but it's not egregiously low where you're like, like what are you guys doing here?
Yeah, I think if there was a half game of juice, like if it were at 8, like they're not going to have many odds like that. Yeah. Like 8.5, I'd be considering going under. 8, I'd just not even bet it. 7.5, I'd go the over. So for sure. So I do think
we do not bet. So we got to can Brad Evans come yell at us for a couple minutes here real quick to tell us if that's right or wrong?
Yeah. All right. Pat has a couple good ones. What are the biggest surprises so far of spring ball. We've only seen one fully open practice, mind you. But Joey, is there one thing you want to talk about, or one thing you've heard about, or we've talked with the coaches about that might be a surprise for you?
I mean, I feel like we talked about this on the last pod a little bit in a way, but I'm like, I need to preface this. Like, what's going to surprise me on the offensive line? Very little, right? Nothing's going to surprise me at quarterback. I'm going to do process of elimination real quickly to get to my answer. Tight end, until Cole Russ, until you see him practice, I don't know what would surprise me there. Same on the defensive line, outside linebacker, inside linebacker in the secondary. So it leaves me at receiver. And I like Braden Trimble juice is real. Like that's a legitimate thing. I'm still not like in fifth gear on that yet, but because you just got to see it, right? You got to see it go through fall and the summer. But that's a real thing. I didn't know that we would be talking this much, or that we would hear the descriptors the way that they are with him. That is what I'm like, you really, really have to listen to, because the things they're saying are very real.
That would be mine, is the way Braden Trimble is being talked about. I liked him as a prospect. I think he can make a huge impact next year and the years beyond. But the way they're talking about him is he can make an impact right now, and that they think this guy was an absolute steal of a get. Like, Brett on signing day said if this guy were in Fort Lauderdale, he would have been a 5-star and would have had all these 60, 70 offers or something like that. Sometimes you're like, that's signing day. He's building up his guy. But the way they're talking about him is like, he's like, I don't want to say Aurelius Ben level prospect, but that he is unlike any wide receiver they have brought into the program. So that has been a surprise, because usually coaches are a little shyer about building up the hype of a freshman like this. And especially for a freshman who needs to add strength, right? But like, I asked Justin Stepp the other day, like, what does excite you so much? Because it's obvious you guys are excited about him. And he said what I've heard behind the scenes, which is his acceleration in and out of breaks is unlike any guy I've coached. And he's coached NFL guys. So you add the length to that, you add the competitiveness, the confidence that Braden Trimble has come with. And I don't know if I'm ready to say he's going to be the third or fourth receiver on this team, because there's some good players and they added some good transfers. But buy stock, because the coaching staff, which usually doesn't do this, the way they're talking about this kid is he could be special down the line.
Yeah, and obviously they put out the video, which was very intentionally done, of his spring ball catch. Like, it went from, I think one of the first, we see a lot of punting and punt returns. We've talked about that on here before. And I saw him back there and I thought, oh, did it before. I think he's done it in high school. So way to get him on the field. Like, that makes sense. So that maybe that could be his path. When you look at the receiver room and what they've got, now I'm like, maybe there's a path for meaningful snaps at wide receiver. That's not going to say he's going to have the fourth most snaps of any wide receiver, or even the fifth most, but you could see a road. Like, he's not going to redshirt. I feel pretty comfortable about that thought right now. So you could see a road where he goes out there and gets 50 to 70 snaps at wide receiver this year, and they give him a chance. Sure, let's give him a chance to make an impact in that way. So we talked about this the last time, so maybe you can help me remember in a different way, because like, there was legitimate Malik Elzy freshman year buzz. He got here in the summer, which I think it's only a few months, but that's an important few months in terms of adjustment. And that was something we wondered about, in terms of him not being that December enrollee and what that could look like. And now it's like, to be totally transparent, like, I'm wondering if we maybe heard it in a way that we thought, oh yeah, this guy will get out there, and maybe we weren't listening well enough. It just didn't go how Malik Elzy told you, right? His freshman year was hope. So that's kind of like I'm not trying to make this about Malik Elzy, but I try to use that as a frame to like, okay, what are we hearing, and are we listening to it right? So we're not saying Braden Trimble big surprise when maybe we're just hearing it wrong. Does that make sense? They
didn't talk about Malik Elzy this way.
There's some good buzz.
They were excited about him. They did not talk about him like this. Like, this is over the top. Like, maybe it's real. The way they're talking about Braden is different than most of the. I think they talked about Gabe in a very high manner when he came in here. I know they're excited about Khalil. Matthew Bailey had a early buzz, and we saw him, repping with the first string when there was an injury in front of him, right? So that opened our eyes, and it's like, oh, this is a guy to watch. So I don't think they were talking about Elzy quite like this because, Malik is more of like I don't want to say one trick guy, but he's big, strong, physical, right? Like Braden's got more dynamicism to his game, I think, because he's both fast, quick, and really good body control. I think Malik's a power guy. Braden's got a little bit of everything in there. So he's got to add strength. So that's my biggest question, but I have no doubt he's going to play. All right. What are the strengths of the team? Pat asks. Joey, what do you got?
Well, quarterback. I mean, we talked about Luke. I don't feel like that's a very original thought. I love what they had.
Starting quarterback.
Yeah, starting quarterback. I mean, that's let's just go beyond that, right? Because I feel like that's like, yeah, duh, of course, Luke Altmaier is a strength. I think the trenches. I feel good about where they are on both sides. You bring back all 5 starters, and I think Brandon Hansen's a guy who's that 6th guy trying to push into that 5th role. I do have questions about depth on the offensive line, very real questions, and how that shakes out if an injury hits. That would be my holdup on that. But then you go on to the defensive side. I love what they have on the defensive line. I love that they have Gabe Akis back at outside linebacker, and Alec Bryan has just kind of been waiting around for this opportunity that we think he is in front of him with Joe Barna. So I like the trenches. Injury could make me feel differently, especially on the offensive side. Defensive side, I think they can withstand an injury or two, especially on the defensive line. But I think that's finally starting to build to what we maybe thought with this program, and that's just takes time to develop some of those guys. And obviously getting J.C. Davis, getting Melvin Priestley back with huge impacts on the tackle positions, but and then the Wisconsin transfers on the defensive side. Those I know you watched them very intently during the open practice and came away impressed.
Yeah, James Thompson Jr. is just built like unlike anybody they've had. Just a true 4-5 technique, like big, strong, long, 6'6", 300 pounds. He's got leadership qualities. I really like him. But Kurt Neal was really impressive in practice. And with T. Rod Edwards' waiver eligibility getting denied by the NCAA, which from everything we've heard at Northwestern, he played 5 games. They marked it down as 3. Northwestern did. I'll dig more on this, but like, I didn't expect him to get this waiver. Like, it is not a surprise to me that they didn't. And Illinois did not plan like it because they went and got Kurt Neal.
And Brett kind of described it as a Hail Mary when he first told us this on Pro Day.
Yeah. So I know they'd had a player before. I'm trying to remember who it was. Dale Campbell, I believe, was the kid that got this waiver. So this time they didn't get it. So it was worth the shot. But T-Raw was prepping for the NFL draft for a reason. Illinois went and got Kurt Neal for a reason. But long to say, like, Kurt Neal really impressed me during the training camp practice we saw, spring practice we saw. So I think he's going to be a really good starter for them. Jeremiah Warren's right behind him. So I agree with that on the defensive line. Running back is a strength. I mean, Aiden Lawfrey and Josh McCray, what they did at the end of the last year, they sound so much more confident. It's such a dynamic duo. Caden Fagan getting healthy. I'm always worried about him just because he's had injury issues every year for the last 3 years. A hip injury I always worry about, especially for a running back. But then Khalil Valentine's behind them, and then they're bringing in John Forster and Cedric Weich. I think the strength of this team is in the secondary. I just look up and down this thing. Xavier Scott is potential to be an All-American. He's going to be an NFL player. Caleb Patterson and Torrey Cox Jr., really different defensive backs. Torrey, the undersized, sticky guy. Caleb, the big physical guy. But I thought they showed themselves to be solid, quality starters. And I think Juice Clark has the potential to be an NFL guy as well. And he played starters reps late in the season. And they got some really intriguing people, Tyson Rooks, Tanner Heckel, Vernon Woodward, Amara Reynolds. I just think they have depth there that I don't worry about an injury or two. And that's safety. I feel like they're loaded, right? Like Matthew Bailey to me was a star, like a superstar late in the season. I think he can have a big year with a lot of takeaways. We know Miles Scott's solid veteran back there. Mac Rosetich and is, I think, a starting caliber kind of safety back there. That's basically your third guy who rotates in. And I still think highly of Subor Kareem. It's just he's behind Matthew Bailey. And it's hard to take Matthew Bailey off the field. So I just think when you talk about talent and depth mix, I don't think it's better than the secondary for this program.
Yeah, I really like what they have in the secondary. Juice Clark being kind of a quote-unquote third corner, just based on who started last year. That guy's starter caliber, right? And he played that. He played starter reps down the stretch of the season. And I'm a huge fan of Matthew Bailey. I'm a huge fan. I talked to him. I'll have a story out, Jeremy, this weekend about Matt Bailey and kind of, it's funny when we were just talking about, the way they've talked about freshmen. And you'll remember the practice, Sidney Brown was out with the concussion. It was an open practice. I think in retrospect, maybe they didn't love that the open practice was that day because it became the Matt Bailey day. And everyone was like, whoa, this guy is having something. Brett Bielema, I remember exactly where he was when he said it, what he said. He said, he was a late addition to us, but he's going to be a guy I think 32 teams are going to want in the future. Matt Bailey hadn't played a single snap of college football to that point. And a little bit of growing pains early, but he was good at the end of last season. He was really, really good. And he talked about the value of snaps. Then Miles Scott, Mac Resetich, I love that duo, what they're able to do. I think Mac Resetich slots into that dime defensive back role, and that'll be a good path for him to get playing time. It's a good secondary. And there's still going to be, at some point, there's going to be a younger, maybe it's Amar Reynolds, maybe it's Werner Woodward, maybe it's one of the incoming freshmen that Corey Parker is going to talk in training camp about, and Aaron Henry. And, hey, these guys are impressive, and they'll be that fourth guy. Where's Tanner Heckel fit in? Where's as you mentioned, Tyson Rooks fit in. They've gotten early buzz, but I like what they've got back there. And they've had a good sell, and you're seeing that good sell with some of those guys now start to manifest as this. I'm not going to call it the next wave to 2022 because those are 3 draft picks, right? Like that's huge. That's huge praise, but they are that next group of defensive backs I think can be a strength of this team.
All right. Pat also asked, what are the holes on this team that need to be filled? I don't know how active they're going to be in the transfer portal here. I do think there's going to be some exits because they need to cut down their roster. I think they could use another punter, to be honest with you, because Keelan Crimmins, only 1 year of eligibility. I think they're going to try and get a waiver for a second year, but obviously you can't count on that. They, I think, need another punting option. They got Colin Blocky in here as a redshirt freshman walk-on. I just don't know if that's what you want to count on. For me, Joey, I am still worried about the depth on the offensive line. That's my biggest concern for them right now, because I think there's 6 guys they would feel comfortable about right now: Kreutz, Geske, Davis, Priestley, Brandon Henderson, and probably Brandon Hansen. Aiden Knappich, I think, can come in and play left tackle if they need him to, but they'd like to redshirt him, the Idaho transfer, and have him be your left tackle next year. TJ McMillan at center, you feel solid about, but man, like if you have 2 injuries there, I get concerned. And that's why you got to continue ramping up the offensive line. This is what's difficult is when you have some guys who are quality depth, they want to go elsewhere. Hunter Whitenack, right? Or Zy Chrysler, guys like that. So that's what's hard about this position. They want to go find elsewhere, but that's why it's important to develop some depth here. We'll see what Bart Miller can do with Saphir Stewart. Eddie Turk has moved to the offensive line, but he's out for this spring. Michael McDonough's getting a bunch of reps, but hard to play guys in their first and second year. So 1 injury, I think I'm fine. 2 injuries gets me concerned. The other thing I'll say is, this is true of any team. Luke Altmaier gets hurt, it's just a different team. It's just a completely different team. So he needs to stay healthy, because Trey Petty, is he going to be ready to make a big impact as a backup this year? I don't think so. Ethan Hampton, I think, could come in and game manage, give you a running element to it, but there's still a big gap between Altmaier and I think Hampton, and then the other guys just are so inexperienced. So not having a Donovan Leary gives me cause for concern.
Yeah, Donovan Leary, who, mind you, is competing for the starting job at Tulane right now. Yeah, to your point, I mean, I feel like we're glossing over Luke Altmaier and a little, because we should. Like, we know what he is. We know how good he is. We know that it goes without saying that if Luke gets hurt, things are, there's flags that pop up. That's every team for the most part in America. But the offensive line depth, I second that. I love the 5. I think the starting 5 is the strength of this team, as we talked about. But if Kreutz goes down, McMillan's a guy they really trust. Obviously, we've seen him in that role for a little bit, and Hansen would be that 6th guy. But to your point, if you need a 7th or 8th, who do you have? Aiden Knappich is, to me, kind of a break glass in case of emergency option, because you would really prefer to redshirt him. He's on board with that, by the way, which is a really big deal when you're going to get a guy out of the transfer portal. And the hard part is, one, you've got to – there's roster limits, and you've got to address what that looks like and get down to that roster limit if you're Illinois, and which would hamper potentially who you could bring in as a potential offensive lineman in the transfer portal. And 2, offensive linemen, no, they don't – I mean, for the most part, you don't have to get in the portal and try to heat for a job at the offensive line. Like, there, not a lot of guys are signing up to go to a place with 5 returning starter and without a clear-cut path to starting. There's just, the demand is too high. Like, you don't have to do that, especially in the spring window. So it would be harder to get somebody to come in and be on that path, I guess. So you really need some of those younger guys this spring. Maybe it's Zach Amlin. Maybe it's, as you mentioned, Zafir Stewart, to step up and be ready if their name was called somewhere in the middle of the season.
All right, PJ asks, it feels as if guys along the interior of the defensive line like Bray, Warren, and Farrell can take a step forward for the defense, and they'll be even better than we expect it to be. How confident are you that those guys are ready to make leaps in their third years? Yeah, Joe, I think this is one of the more underrated storylines of this offseason is you lost key defensive linemen and T-Rod Edwards and Dennis Brooks Jr. and Ezekiel Holmes, I thought made some impacts in the bowl game. He forced a huge fumble and, got some rotational reps late in the season. But Thompson and Kurt Neal feel like no doubters. Those guys are going to make a good impact. I think they're going to be starters. Jeremiah Warren might have something to say about that nose tackle position with Kurt Neal. And Tommy Wadurjai, I think, is going to play in the rotation. Whether he wins the starting job or Alex Bray remains to be seen. But I love that they added those 3 guys, plus Alex Bray, Jeremiah Warren, Pat Farrell, now look like Big Ten players, right? Like they now are strong and physical enough to play in the Big Ten. Last year, they got overpowered at times, especially Bray and Farrell. Jeremiah Warren held up a little bit better. But Bray and Farrell have really gotten a lot of reps, gotten a lot of experience. I don't know if Terrence Jameson can be higher on Alex Bray and what he can do as a true junior here. So, yeah, I feel way better about those guys as rotation players now that they're just physically mature, mentally more mature, experienced, and just having an actual defensive line rotation where your starters, Joe, you have 500 reps instead of 600 or 700 during an entire season, or 45 to 50 reps during a game instead of 70 like Johnny Newton used to have, could really help this team late in games and just help them hold up against the run. Like, because I don't have a lot of concerns about this team getting some pass rush. It's about, can you hold up against the run? And I think their development is on track to where, yes, those will be at least good rotation players, which Illinois had a huge drop off to the second string. I don't think it's going to be as precipitous this year.
Yeah, I would just say before, Jeremiah Warren is out for spring, but he is a candidate for I still call him a young guy because he's young in terms of snaps. But he's a candidate for my young guy to watch going into the fall. He looks so much like the part.
Single digit guy now.
Yeah, that's your thing. And it's worth monitoring, right? That obviously is a meaningful thing. So he's a really watch him guy in fall camp, because he had that time with Johnny Newton, with Keith Randolph, with Calvin Avery, with T-Rod Edwards, with Denzel Daxon, maybe not Calvin, with Denzel Daxon and T-Rod Edwards. So I'm really high on what he can do. And to your point, to bring in the 2 Wisconsin guys and Durjaye, you've hedged a little bit where there's a little bit more wiggle room. If Pat Farrell, Alex Bray, Jeremiah Warren, I would like to throw Angelo McCollum in this conversation, because I think, circle his name, he's got pass rush value in a really big way.
I wrote down when I was watching one-on-ones, which is my favorite thing, in training camp that we ever get to see. And I wrote Kurt Neal's name down several times. The guy's name I wrote down the most was Angelo McCollum. Just, I thought he was pretty dominant. Now, some of those are against second team guys. Some of them were against starters though. And Andrew McCollum, there's just a twitchiness. There's his hand usage. There's some shades of a young Johnny Newton. I'm not saying all-American Johnny Newton, but there are shades of that where he can be a real disruptor. And I'm glad he threw his name out there, because I thought he was, in practice, I thought he was one of the guys who really stood out to me.
Yeah, I'm high on what he can do, really even in some snaps this year. But I think the way, though, you bring in some guys that are going to be heavy rep guys, your James Thompsons, your Kurt Neal, that I assume Durjaye is still going to be a very heavy rep guy, whether that's a starter or split in time. I don't know how that's going to go. But now you're starting to see the combination of ready to play, productive Big Ten guys with some of these younger players. Eventually we can't call them that, but these younger players ready to contribute at a level where they're not getting overmatched. I talked to Alex Bray about just kind of like, you do get a little bit overmatched in your first year in the Big Ten. And truth be told, physically, there's still growing to do for him, for Pat Farrell. But that experience is something that you hope pays off now this year with those guys and a little bit of a bigger frame and kind of with more prominent voices in that room. But yeah, I think those three have to step up. But I do also think you have a little bit more wiggle room, just given the quality of transfers you brought in the portal this offseason.
And Joe, you wrote a great story on Terrence Jameson. I have a lot of faith that he's going to maximize his group. Right. And if he's got faith in Alex Bray and Pat Farrell, I thought had a pretty good practice when we saw him. We know they're high on Jeremiah Warren. I just got a lot of faith there. Chris Anderson, Jordan Anderson at fullback or tight end. We also have a super chat from Def. He said, let's ponder Jordan Anderson, tight ends, yak potential. So go ahead, Joey.
I think a little bit of both, tight end and H-back, fullback, however you want to look at that. We saw him mostly at H-back last season when he was kind of, what do we call it, like a half shift to tight end, or the early stages of a tight end shift. I think that is where I think they wanted him. I think they saw that a long time ago with the potential for him, and he's big enough to do it. I think he's a little bit, from just talking around, I think he's a little nastier at the line of scrimmage than you would maybe think for a running back converting over to that position. How's it going to work in the rotation? I don't know, right? You have Tanner Arkin, you have Cole Rusk, you have Davin Stoffel. So that's why when we get to Big Def's point here, I don't know how to set that yet, because I think there are guys in front of him. Like Cole Rusk is your downfield guy. Period. Like that is who he is. Stoffel, Arkin can give you a little bit of that, but they're guys who are gonna move people at the line of scrimmage. They're gonna keep Luke Altmaier in a good place at the line of scrimmage. So where does Jordan Anderson, he of 4 months full time at the tight end position, where's that fit? I don't know. So I don't want to go over there. I think he's got potential to be a yards after the catch guy because he's a running back. We saw him with good hands in high school. He's a guy I remember thinking when I watched him, he never got hit square. Like he moves pretty well for being a big guy. It's just he's new. And I like the guys that they have in front of him. I know they're really, really high on Stoffel. They love him and his physicality. Obviously,
he's really intriguing. We got to see him finally move. That's the best part of practice. You just kind of get to see these guys move a little bit. Like Tanner Arkin's, I don't want to call him stiff, but he's just not the agile guy. He's a big, boxy, block you in front of you. I thought he was one of the best blockers on Illinois last year. He's one of the more valuable guys. We don't talk about Tanner Arkin. And I do think he can catch the underneath routes, and he's just not a downfield threat. Cole Rusk, you hope can be that. I still got to see it, right? I still got to see him healthy, moving, what it looks like, how he reacts the year after such a catastrophic injury. I mean that in just like you miss a whole year, right? And then you got to get your confidence back in your knee. Torn ACLs, people come back from all the time, of course. But Davin Stoffel has both that size of 6'6", 250, 260, and then he's got some athleticism, some fluidity to him that is really intriguing. He just looks like a Big Ten Y tight end. So that's why he's really, really intriguing. But Jordan Anderson is just a little bit different than those guys, right? 6'3", 245, built like a big running back or a small tight end. He's built like an H-back. And I think you've seen guys, Tanner Arkin kind of got into that role his first year here, and then finally got on as kind of an inline blocker. I think it's a great role to get him on the field, but I'm not going to go into this year thinking 30 catches for 250 yards for Jordan Anderson, given all the other targets they have and the other guys who are playing enough. But I do think he can find a role in that tight end room that Barry Lunny can get really creative with him. And this guy who got some carries, some meaningful carries on 4th and short, 3rd and short, late in the season. So I do think they trust him and they think he can be a good football player. And yeah, Brett Bielema putting the list of heights and weights of guys who got drafted at tight end in front of Jordan Anderson was a good move, because I do think he can find a role here. And given the unknown of Cole Rusk right now, I think it's really important that he gets these reps and can really, speed up his process of acclimating to this position, because they might need him. They really might need him, because this is not a very deep position of guys that you feel like you're actually going to play. Because before Jordan Anderson moved to tight end, Jake Furtney was your 4th tight end as a redshirt freshman, former walk-on. So yeah, I think there's a role to potentially be had for the 3rd or 4th tight end here.
Yeah, and I do want you brought it up. I do want to kind of paint the picture a little bit. Brett Bielema said last season he called Jordan Anderson in and had the heights and weights of unnamed tight ends. And I can't remember if they were Brett's past tight ends or just NFL tight ends. They were
last year's drafted tight ends.
That's right. Guys who made money doing this, right? And the way he talked, like I'm kind of taking it to another level. They kind of presented it like, right? Like almost said nothing, but just kind of like the point and what do you think? And Anderson's like, okay, yeah, I see it. And I just
it's because I'm looking at this. This is really smart of him. Last year's tight ends were pretty short, comparatively. Brock Bowers 6'3", 243. Jatavian Sanders 6'4", 245. Cade Stover 6'4", 247. Theo Johnson was kind of an outlier, but a lot of 6'3", 6'4" tight ends drafted last year.
I will say I'm glad this move happened, and I'm glad this move happened going into spring ball, because I do think he has the skills to be someone at that position who can make an impact. I think there's a time element and an adjustment element to that, but I think I'm really intrigued by what he can do there. I just don't know how to set those expectations. Now, to your point, I thought your point was really good. Some of that is just, in fairness, going to depend on how Cole Rusk just comes back to playing the game of football after, when I talked to him in last season, he called it the trifecta, right? I mean, he had his knee in terms of his knee. So there's some work there, some damage there. It happened early in training camp. I know he expects to be back by that first game, but having Jordan Anderson as a guy who could give you a similar downfield threat in theory, I love that, because I think you could need it. I think he's got the skills to do it.
I think he's more just a dump off and let him work in space, right? Like H-back.
I think there's going to be a player too that I think people are going to see him. He's a big dude. He's got some wheels for being as big as he is.
A wheel route. I can see a wheel route.
I think he could catch some people by surprise a little bit with the way he moves and some speed. But again, that's down the line, because he's been a tight end for 4 months. He's been a tight end for like 6 or 7 practices, right? So but I do think there's potential intrigue there.
I just remember, the wheel route was a Caden ran against Minnesota 2 years ago, like stuff like that. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Benjamin, early predictions of the pecking order for wide receiver and running back, breakout player. So I don't know if the breakout player has to be running back or wide receiver. So pecking order for wide receiver and running back. Let's go running back to start. I think this is right now it's Aiden Lawfrey and Josh McCray. And then Caden Fagan will be in this mix once he is fully healthy. I love having that 3. I love having those 3 guys. But yeah, trying to figure out who gets the most carries of that group. It's just trying to predict health, right? Like
I think the difference is very marginal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
One thing I would be buying is Aiden Lawfrey has solidified himself as the speed option of that group. So I would almost feel most bullish about saying Aiden Lawfrey, getting the most touches here, but he's had, consistent injury issues. Josh McCray's had consistent injury issues. Caden Fagan's had consistent injury issues. And they love Khalil Valentine. And Thad Ward said now it's about adding strength and developing that part of his game, because we feel like he can add that part eventually. But the way Josh McCray ended the season, man, he's a guy who wears on you. And then you mix it with Aiden Lawfrey and his speed and ability to break away. And then we've seen the flashes of Fagan. So it feels like if there's a breakout player running, it should be Caden Fagan. All he needs is to stay healthy, because at the end of last season, before he had that injury, and the end of the season before he had the injury, it's like, man, that guy can be an all Big Ten running back, but can he stay on the field? That's been the question with all these guys.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's him as the breakout, because I feel like Aiden Lawfrey had his breakout and Josh McCray re-broke out, and he's had at this point 2 or 3 breakouts, right? In terms of him on the football field. I don't think it's going to be a huge gap between the 2 or between the 3. Really, I think there's probably a gap between 3 and 4 in terms of carries and productivity. But right now, do you just put Aiden Lawfrey as 1 by the slightest of slight margins and go to Josh McCray?
I would just kind of consistently go with Aiden, being the guy I feel most comfortable with getting like 150 touches, because he started all of last year. He's kind of the first guy in the field, and as good as I think Khalil Valentine can be, I just don't think he's threatening Aiden this year, especially as a pass protector, as a guy who can actually break some tackles. But then it's just, at the end of the day, Joe, it's just nice to have 3 or 4 of these guys that you trust, because one of them's going to get hurt at the minimum.
Yeah, and hey, we need to credit Thad Ward. Like I do want to bring up the James White impact. I think someone in our chat asked about it, but Thad Ward, they love Thad Ward in Champaign. Everybody, Brett Bielema raves about him. All those players absolutely rave about him. He's probably an assistant coach. I don't know if we talk about enough because he's also really helped foster this committee approach, which is hard. It's hard to get 3 guys to buy in, let alone 4 guys to buy in to this approach of, hey, one day it might be 10, the next day it might be 20. It kind of depends on how the game plays out. And he has legitimately done a really good job of fostering that in the running back room, getting that buy-in from those guys. And then you added James White into the room, who has lived it. Aiden Lawfrey told me, he said, kind of full circle, Brett Bielema talked about James White and those Wisconsin running back rooms when he recruited me. And now he's here. And James White knows, hey, you share a backfield with John Clay, Melvin Gordon, and who am I missing here? There's an obvious one. Monty Ball. You share that running back room, carries are going to fluctuate a little bit because that's an incredibly talented room. So they should have someone there who can drive that home even further. Like, he made north of $15 million in his NFL career. He won 3 Super Bowls, 3 Big Tens. Like, that plays when you're trying to continue to keep that idea going. And someone asked, I think the reason I brought him up in the chat is him as a pass catcher. That was his role in the NFL. He was a really stinking good runner in college. Don't ever forget that. But
he made so many big catches, James White, in those Super Bowls.
Absolutely. And I think that's something he can, like, Thad Ward's talked about his running backs, his outlets in the passing game. I think James White can just be further, right? And continue to push that further. But man, Thad Ward, you got Big Def. Big Def is back. What a good guy.
And when you lose a Pat Bryant, right? Maybe you need to go with your check down a little bit more. So maybe those running backs, especially in Aiden Lawfrey, gets involved in the passing game. Josh McCray's a pretty good pass catcher. Caden Fagan showed signs of being able to get a lot of yak after that because it's hard to bring him down in the open field. So yeah, I'm wondering about how much more involved those guys get in the passing game because do you have the guys down the field that you can trust? And let's get into that. The pecking order of receiver. Man, if I had to guess, 3 of the top 4 guys I feel pretty good about, right? I think Hudson Clement's going to play a lot. I mean, he's proven it at this level. They brought him in. He's one of their big additions in the transfer portal. And he's just versatile. He's experienced, really solid. I would still bet Hudson Clement most likely to lead the team in receptions if he's healthy. Then I would say Colin Dixon for sure. I wrote a story on him. They're very high on what he can be. Started last year, 3rd most reps among receivers. I thought he showed a lot of yak ability once he did get the ball. His targets are going to go up. And he's just that power slot, helps you in the run game. I don't think that should be overvalued or undervalued by fans. Like, having a big slot receiver that can block is really important for this team because I do think they're going to run the ball better this year. But also he can play the Z or the X if you need him to, and has the size to do that. So another year of experience. He's more of a veteran now. And then Hank Beatty, you just feel comfortable when you go 11 personnel. If he's your slot, like, you can go throw him the ball. We all saw the obvious catches he made late in the season. Then it's up for grabs, Joey. Malik Elzy, this is your time. Big, physical, needs to show more consistent hands. They say he's had a good spring. Alex Kapka-Jones, they talk about him a lot. And I don't think that should be overlooked. A guy who played over Malik Elzy late in the season last year, and then you throw into the mix Braden Trimble. So I would probably lean towards Elzy right now just because of the size, the physicality, the blocking. But I feel like they trust Alex Kapka-Jones as a receiver maybe a little bit more right now. So, and then Justin Bowick, I've got to throw him in there. We saw in practice the Ball State receiver, his ability to win, those contested catches. It's clear. He's built unlike any receiver they have. 6'5".
Yeah, everything you said, I agree with your 3 or 4. When you were talking, I was looking up Justin Bowick's stats. I have almost no frame of reference for what I think he can be on the football field. I love his size. I love his big, go up and get it, contested, kind of box guys out. I think he's got some speed. He has played a stunningly little amount of football, right? I mean, he started at Eastern Illinois. He played in
4 games at Ball State.
3 games, they say, at Eastern Illinois. That can't even be right, according
to
he's
played more than that. He played.
That can't be right, according to
FBS level. He's played 4 games, right? And 2 of them were awesome, unbelievable. He's at least a guy that you can throw it up to if you're Luke Altmaier, red zone or down the field, and feel like you have a chance. Now, can he be consistent? Can he consistently run routes? Can he move the chains? I feel like he's at least a red zone guy, or at least a sub package guy where it's like we get him in 15, 20 reps, big play guy. Can he do all the other little things? That's the questions I have about him that I don't have about Hudson Clement.
Yeah, you're right. He played in 19 games, Eastern Illinois. He had 48 catches for a little less than 750 yards. He played like his high school numbers are really small. He played those 3 games, preserved his eligibility at Ball State, ended up at Illinois. I love he's got the tools, right? Physically, he so much looks the part. I just don't know. I do not know where to land with him. And I then on that, you mentioned Capka Jones, agreed. Like his name continues to come up. He stayed the course. Then Malik Elsey's Malik Elsey. Like I think Malik Elsey has a ton of talent. He was a big recruiting win for them. This is as open as the door has been during his college career to go in there and take a ton of snaps. There's no Pat Bryant. There's no Zachary Franklin. There's no Casey Washington. I don't really want to throw Isaiah Williams into that mix because he was primarily in the slot, but the door right now is there for Malik Elsey to run through and take it. So, yeah, I know what Clement's going to give you, Beatty, Dixon, know what those guys. And after that, that's where it gets really, really interesting to me because there's a lot of options who can step in there and make some plays. But I do think among those next wave of options, Capka Jones, Elsey, Bowick are the 3 that really stick to the front of my mind.
For Elsey, no doubts about him as a blocker. Physicality, they need that, and that can be very valuable for them. But can you show consistent hands? Like, can Luke Altmaier trust you to go win that ball? That's going to be the most important thing for him is showing that consistency and confidence to make those plays. Because this is a group that I feel like they're going to rotate a lot more, right? I mean, you had Zachary barely coming off the field, Pat Bryant barely coming off the field, Isaiah Williams, Casey Washington barely coming off the field. I think now you're going to have more of a true rotation, which could keep these guys fresher. Right. But you also kind of like that linebacker group last year, Joey, you can kind of put them in positions to succeed. I don't think Hank Beatty is going to play a lot like when you're running the ball. Right. That's pretty clear. But that's the trick is you don't want to obviously show what you're running by putting the guys out there. That's why Colin Dixon is a sleeper for me. Like, I just don't know if fans know that name. And I think he's going to take a big leap. Like we can talk about Elsey, we can talk about some of these other really exciting additions, but Colin Dixon and Hank Beatty are stepping into much bigger roles this year.
Absolutely. Colin Dixon, because of his build, he's built like a running back. We've said that a lot. He played some of that in high school. I think there's a lot of ways they can use him. And that is what I'm really interested in seeing is how they unlock all of those skills and how they use all of those skills within the offense. But he is very much a name to know. Could he be the second leading receiver on this team this year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I think
he's going to get more. He's going to get more reps than Beatty. He's going to get more reps because he can block in that slot position. He can play on the outside. Beatty's as much as he was as great as he was in that bowl game. What did he play? 13 offensive snaps, something insane like that. So like
Hank Beatty is so good at maximizing the snaps he has on the field because it feels like when you think about that bowl game, it feels like he was involved in so many just enormous plays. Yeah. And then you look, it's like, oh, it's just 13 snaps. Yeah. Like he really leaves a memory, right? I feel like he's on the field all the time, and he's really not.
That's why I wouldn't mind having him as my kick returner because I just get him the ball, get him on the field as much as possible in those kind of roles. All right, Illinois Football 7 asks, what position group are you most excited about right now? Which group is best set up for the future? We kind of answered the first one, but best set up for the future, Joey, what would you go with? One offensive and one defense that you feel?
Offense, I'll go quarterback. I really think that this collection of talent in the quarterback room, if you need to rely on one of the young guys this year, I'm not going to feel as comfortable, right? But I think when you look at your Trey Petty, Carson Boyd, I know Shawnee Newton's coming in. I'll be curious if that long-term is going to be his position. We've talked about that a great amount. Michael Clayton is another really talented kid they have a commit from in 2026. That is a lot of talent in that room. And I think that you just need one of them to be good for a little bit. And I think there's a pretty good hit rate that one of them is going to be good. I like what they've got there. This is as good of a quarterback recruiting collection over the last 3 cycles that we've seen at Illinois in quite some time. And that's exciting because it's the most important position, right? And I feel like Carson Boyd, when we watched him,
I like him.
And we've said this for a long time. You have, in particular, I'm not going to try to take any credit for that, but you're like, man, if this guy were 6'3", he's got offers from every single place in the country. He's got everything but the height. The ball comes out of his hand. He's got a lot of velocity. We saw that. I'm not very smart, but I was able to see the ball come out of his hand pretty good. And I think Trey Petty's got that, like, and Carson Boyd, really, that it quality.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I remember watching Trey Petty bouncing around in Orlando, and I'm like, this guy's got, like, if you just had no numbers and you saw him kind of moving, like, it's a quarterback.
Yeah.
I like what they've got there, man.
Yeah. Like, I think either of those guys, I think one of those guys is going to turn into a starter. I really like Carson, the complete package he has, except for the height. Trey, like, I don't want to make, I didn't think any of them blew us away in the practice we saw. They looked like young quarterbacks getting reps in their offense for the first time, really. I'm just not there yet. I'm not there yet. If I had Donovan Leary on this roster, I'd feel a heck of a lot better about it.
We're talking long.
I know, but I have big questions about the quarterback in 2026. Like Ethan Hampton, Trey Petty, Carson Boyd. If you're going in with that, I got some questions. That's a big question mark for me going into 2026. I know Michael Clayton will be here by then, but he's a freshman. Mm-hmm. I would still predict, would not surprise me if Illinois is in the transfer portal, because you lose Luke Altmaier and you have a heck of a sell, and you could get a 1-year guy that really lifts your floor and what could be a tough retooling season in 2026 for Illinois. But I still think there might be a guy before those guys get in there. So
that's intermediate term. That's how I'm selling this to myself.
Somewhat long term, because I got to see it from those guys, but that's not going to be for a while. So maybe that's unfair. Wide receiver would be my one for offense. You still got Justin Bullock, Hudson Clement for another year. You got Malik Elzy for another year. Colin Dixon's got 2 more years of eligibility. Tyshawn Griffin, we saw, has got some juice. He's still coming back from that injury. But Braden Trimble, we talked all about, what they think of him. That's a guy who could start next year, right? Like Davon Grant, Kenyon Alston. Love those 2 additions in this class. And if they can lock up Nasir Rankin, that's the best group of Illinois wideouts I would have covered here. And they've had some NFL guys here recently. So really high wide receiver. I'll say it again on defense. It's secondary. Xavier Scott's an NFL player. I think Matthew Bailey is going to have a chance to play in the NFL. Juice Clark's going to have a chance to play there. And the young guys, Tanner Heckel, Vernon Woodward, Amar Reynolds, I like Tywan Cox, Zanai Scott, Robert Jones, Andre Lovett, Desmond Stratton. Oh, they got a top 100 kid in Victor Singleton coming in. They're shooting their shot with Brody Jennings, a commit to Michigan this weekend, a 4-star kid. You got Aaron Henry and Corey Parker recruiting, the guys responsible for the 2 highest drafted first-round picks at cornerback the last 2 years. I love what they got in the secondary.
Yeah, I do want to go real quick on a hat tip to running back offensively. I think obviously what they're continuing to bring in, you've got a name on Illini Inquirer, a guy they're pushing for at running back. So I just wanted to mention that because I do think there's some long-term, you really like what they've got there. Agreed on the secondary. So to be different, I'm going to go linebacker. Jeremy, we would not have said that. We've said this since November or October last year, but I want to drive home how much the perception of that position has changed since last October. Like those reps that they got for Malachi Hood, that they got for James Cruz, those guys got better. They used them. They put them in positions to be successful. Then you go and get 4-star Grant Bierman. You go and get Ish Conte. Those guys are long. They're fast. They look like they fit at this level. They look like they fit what Archie McDaniel wants at this level with that speed, that power, that size, all of those things. And then, ho-hum, here comes Cam Thomas. Next season, here comes Caden Cobb in the class of 2026. I think that they're getting some more versatility there, but they're also just getting big, fast guys at the linebacker position. And I'm not trying to, they just haven't had that. They just haven't had that combination, and they've had to kind of mix and match and piece what works in certain packages, especially after Dylan Rosiak went down with an injury. Good to see him back at practice, by the way, Jeremy. I think we've mentioned that on here, but worth mentioning again. I just think they've got a lot of talent in that position. I think Archie McDaniel has a good grasp on how to make good linebackers.
Yeah, and they got 2 good ones coming in with Cam Thomas and Caden Cobbs, and obviously shooting for more in this class. Tony Williams taking an official visit in a couple of weeks. So Jacob Eberhardt, kid out of St. Louis, that could play linebacker or safety for them. So they're looking at even more. They've certainly upgraded the talent there. All right, Alana asked 4 games in 2025 that will decide whether this season is legendary, good, or meh. All right, here's the 4 I would circle. At Duke, September 6th, second game of the year. Duke team that's got maybe the most expensive quarterback. I don't know if Carson Beck or Mensa, the guy, the transfer they got, is the highest paid this year, but they said, bye Malik Murphy. We're upgrading with a Tulane quarterback transfer. So that's a big game. There's a 9-win team last year. Manny Diaz.
Kansas vibes.
Yeah, like it's how I felt last year about Kansas. That sets the tone of the season, raises like, oh, this is what we should think of this team. So if you lose that one, all of a sudden maybe you start to lack some confidence, right? Like, I don't know if Illinois doesn't win Kansas if they win Nebraska, if that makes sense, because I just think the confidence they gained in that game. First Big Ten road game at Indiana, like they lose a lot. I think Illinois has a really good chance to win that game, but no matter what you think, Kurt Signetti, it's a heck of a coach. They got a lot to replace, but going on the road in the Big Ten, that could be a primetime game between two kind of upstart programs here. I still feel like that would be one of my 4. Then, do I put Ohio State, or do we just kind of understand like that's what would make a legendary season?
I think if I understand, yeah, I was gonna say, I think if I understand the question, Ohio State is a legendary game. Like if you win that, you probably are in that legendary season status. So that would be my legendary. The first 2 are kind of meh.
Tone setters.
Tone setters, if to use a phrasing in her question, it would be kind of like the meh games. If it goes one way, if they lose to Duke, maybe people worry about meh. So what makes it a special? I think it's special, the one that we have, like if we're a gap we need to fill, is at USC.
Yes. The other
Wisconsin.
That at Wisconsin game feels big, but the other one that just I have highlighted on my screen right now is Ryan Walters is at Washington. And that just feels like a sneaky game. Like even if Illinois loses to Ohio State, but say they get off to like what would that be? A 6-1 start. And you go in as like a top 15 team at Washington. It's currently a Saturday. That feels like it's going to be a Friday game on Fox.
Hold on. Keep talking because I have a reason I would argue against that.
Is there another Friday game it feels like one of those games that could sneak up, could be a really late kickoff, whether it's a Friday or Saturday, Central Time. And Jedfish's second year. And just that game concerns me a little bit. Maybe that's just my trap game, but like that's the game I have circled as like that one's not as easy as you might think based on last year's records.
Agreed on what you're saying. The reason I would push back on it being a Friday, because I think on paper it makes sense. Illinois is coming off of a bye going into that game, or an open week, to our guy Bob Osmondson of the News Gazette. Washington is traveling back from Michigan the week before. So that is, you got a team going back west, going back home, a bye week. I think that Washington would justifiably have some pretty big questions about that.
Brett Bielema's record off of off weeks is great. Like they're really good off of off weeks. So maybe I shouldn't be concerned. USC would be the one, right? Great. Like, cause that would be potentially a 5-0 start, right?
Very Michigan vibes from, if you try to look back and compare it to this year, if Kansas and Duke are the same, USC beating that name brand. If you could beat that name brand at homecoming, that kind of feels like, that Michigan game turned it to special, right, this season. And I think Ohio State could take it to another level if you could do it. And I don't say these like I think it's some done deal, but if you had to pinpoint the games, what they would be, I think that's probably our list.
I think they mostly got to be in that first 7 games, right? Because you have 7 games in a row, tough matchups at Duke. Like, I don't want to overlook at Western Michigan because they're a good MAC team, but Illinois should be at the point where they beat teams like that. At Indiana, coming off their year that they have a lot to replace. I think Illinois should be better than them. But USC, I think Illinois is a better football team right now, but they have talent. They can score points. At Purdue, you should handle them. I think that this year, but we know Illinois-Purdue games have kind of been crazy, but the Ryan Walters factor is thrown out the window. But then like the last 5 games, Joey, really manageable because of who you play, but also 3 of those 5 games are at home and you have 2 off weeks. Since after Ohio State, off week at Washington versus Rutgers, off week versus Maryland, at Wisconsin versus Northwestern. If you can set yourself up with 5 wins over the first 7, right, or more, man, you can really do well at the end of the season with a couple off weeks. You feel like your depth is stronger than a lot of these teams you play back at the end of the schedule. And you feel like last year's experience should really help you there. So, those 4 games I think would all be in the first 7. So, Duke, Indiana, USC, Ohio State for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm 100% with you.
All right, we got a couple more here. Carl, pecking order for the pass rushers. Well, Gabe
Akis, Alec Bryant.
I'm going to go Leon Lowry over Alec Bryant. And then
really? Elaborate.
I just think he's got more bend, more athleticism than Alec. I think Alec's great rotational guy. Alec's going to play starters reps, basically like 400 snaps or something. So maybe Leon gets like 450, 500. I just wouldn't be surprised if Lowry's the guy that starts.
Interesting. I like Bryant just being in the system for as long as he has. And I think Lowry chose Illinois because the system is really what he probably was seeking in Madison. Where'd he come from?
Yeah.
Madison. Yeah. Was seeking in Madison last season. And then we go behind him, Joe Barna, JoJo Hayden.
Daniel Brown. Daniel Brown, intriguing to me.
Very intriguing. I think JoJo Hayden and Daniel Brown have similar intriguing qualities.
Both sub-package guys, right? Like not guys that are going to come in on basically just passing downs. Joe Barna would probably be 4 for me just because, like, if somebody gets hurt, Joe Barna is going to play a lot of snaps, like, because he can be a first and second down guy.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then wrap it up with Mason Moragan coming off of his injury and seeing that's very, very – I mean, I say wrap it up beneath JoJo Hayden, Daniel Brown, then you get down to Moragan, just he's coming off of that.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Got any more I definitely wanted to get to? A lot of people asking like 10, 11 wins. Is that realistic? Yeah, high end for this team? Sure. It's just you need things to go right. Pete, here's one I've been wondering. Terrence Brooks started and played the most important snaps for a college football semifinalist in 2023. Should the fact he could not get on the field for the Illini make us very excited about our cornerbacks, or was there more to the story, or both? There was more here. One, they had players they trusted more than them. They had players who played well. Xavier Scott obviously was great in the nickel, but Caleb Patterson took a big step forward. Torrey Cox was a great addition. And then Jaheim Clark really, really stepped up late in the season. But also, like, Terrence Brooks just wasn't trustworthy enough for this staff. It's based on what they saw in practice, based on what they saw on every day. He's a very talented player. I hope he, does well elsewhere, Joey, in his final year of eligibility. But just what they saw every day in the facility, what they saw in practice, they couldn't trust him as much as these other guys, and these other guys really stepped up their game. So it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, I'm with you. I say, oh boy, because I thought we maybe had been done. This is the last Terrence Brooks question for a little bit, Jeremy.
Maybe he's gone. So.
I get it, and I don't say that like I can't believe anyone's. I get it. I mean, he was a guy we thought was going to be very, very good. Illinois thought was going to be very, very good. He was good at Texas. Like all of those things, it didn't work out. So I get all the questions. I saw it like and didn't realize we were going to get one more, but I get it. Yeah, I think when you also talk about trustworthy, you got to make sure, that secondary, the cohesiveness in the secondary and the way this defense operates. Like, I think that you got to have this Matthew Bailey, Miles Scott, Mac Resetich. Like, you've got to have corners have to have their trust too, because if you get beat, it's usually just Miles Scott sitting back there saving a massive play, right? So, like, I think all of that kind of goes into effect there.
All right, let's wrap up with this one. Mad season 2022 versus 2025. Which DB room are you taking?
2022.
Yes.
I like the depth more maybe in 2025. Devin Witherspoon was the 5th overall pick. He's going to make insane amounts of NFL money. Sidney Brown was a 3rd-round pick. All-American. Quan Martin, 2nd-round pick. Like, come on. That 2022 top end was elite levels of secondary talent in college football.
And Kendall Smith had 5 picks that year, right? Like, so like Miles Scott's been a solid player. Like Kendall Smith was a more productive.
Matthew Bailey was your dime DB and he made a ton of plays. He's the reason, like that year's the reason we're like, holy crap, this guy going into last year.
And you had good version of Taz Nicholson that year. He was a good player that year. And Xavier Scott came in and gave you some solid reps, and Tyler Strain gave you some solid reps. So yes, it's definitely 2022. Like, I like this group a lot. I think Xavier Scott, Matthew Bailey are all Big Ten caliber players. Listen, I don't know if we talk enough about Torrey Cox year, 3 interceptions, 7 pass breakups last year. He can get beat against bigger, more physical guys. But man, he is sticky and he can make plays on the ball. Patterson's big and physical. He can get lost in kind of those intermediate routes. Doesn't get beat deep a lot, Joey, but he can get beat on like just some of those quicker receivers just because he's long and takes him a little bit. But those guys were really good last year. So I think it's one of the strengths of the team. It's just that 2022 defensive backfield. I mean, there's Alabama secondaries that weren't that good, right? They were SEC. Like that was the best secondary basically in the country that year.
Yeah, it's awesome. I hope we look back on it and remember it for as good as it truly was. I think, as you mentioned the corners, really in particular, I think you can extend that to what we saw with linebackers at the end of last season. I think it'll carry. I feel like they have a lot of answers now because like that's what the depth really like gives you beyond sustaining injuries is answers. Hey, if Torrey Cox is getting picked on by a bigger wide receiver, Juice Clark, go out there and take those snaps. And sorry, Torrey, but you understand, right? If Caleb Patterson is getting hit by a quicker wide receiver, you put someone else on, you move some things around. Is that Xavier Scott? Is that Juice Clark? However you want to move and shake it around, they have that. Linebackers, you lose Dylan Rosiak. Okay, Malachi Hood, you're really good at this. James Cruz, you're really good at this. Like I feel like that's where that, especially defensively, that depth shines. They can play that chess game in the course of a game a lot better because they have guys with different skill sets, experience, coaches. This is a good coaching staff who know how to answer that chess game and know where to plug those guys in.
Let's wrap up with this one. Allen, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, then Illini. I think this prediction is a little tentative. I think Illinois is hungrier after the great win in the Citrus Bowl. I mean, Illinois took Penn State down to the wire last year. Ohio State loses 15 draft picks. It feels like Oregon loses a Heisman finalist. It's just the talent level of those programs is a different level, but Illinois' floor is really, really high. It is really, really high going into this season, so I'm excited about it. One guy I want to talk about that I think can take another leap, Melvin Priestley, I think can be their highest drafted offensive lineman out of this current group. Like big, physical, athletic, needs to be a little bit more disciplined. In practice, he started a couple kerfuffles, which is not unlike
that is what makes him who he is, though, right?
That is what makes him who he is. You wrote a phenomenal feature on him last year. But I was talking with Blake Brockermeyer, who is an former NFL tackle, was in the league for 10 years, highly drafted guy. He works for 24/7 Sports, and he was chewing some tape of some of the Illini players. Really likes Gabe Akis. I think Xavier Scott, maybe more like a mid-round guy, but I gave him 2 of the offensive linemen to see what he would think. And he said JC Davis will probably be drafted, but he was really high on Melvin Priestley. And you know it because like the staff knows like he's the most athletic and probably physical player they have on that offensive line. He's a guard at the next level, not a tackle. But year 2, like we talk about the transfer leaps for basketball, I think the transfer leap in year 2 for a Priestley, maybe even a JC Davis, Joey. That's why you feel really good about this offensive line is those 2 guys back with the interior of Kreutz, Gesky, and Brandon Henderson.
I think Kreutz has another level to get to as well. I'm really eager to see what this jump looks like for him. I do, before we get out of here, the draft is in 3 weeks, Jeremy. We just expect Pat Bryant to be the lone Illini, maybe outside chance at T.Roy Edwards, but I would say comfortably Pat Bryant. So forget that. We know that. What would your over-under be for Illinois players drafted in the 2026 NFL draft? Shout out to our guy, Eric, who does a lot of good work on our website for throwing this number out to me, or this idea, rather, out to me.
Is 4.5 too low?
Yes.
5.5?
I don't know. That's why I asked you.
Gabe, Melvin, Xavier, JC, Tanner Ark, and Luke Altmaier are the guys that would have in that group. I would say 4.5 would probably be my number. But when Bielema was talking about Tanner Arkin like he talked about Tip Ryman, it always gets my attention.
I know it.
And Luke, listen, I don't know if he's like on a bunch of people's like no doubt drafted quarterback next year, but if he has another year, even just like last year, why wouldn't he be one of those late round guys? Because it always feels like people are drafting quarterbacks now because they want cheap quarterbacks.
If you're a productive power 4, power 2 quarterback, like I'm going to assume you're going to be picked up and Luke's got traits, right? He's not system productive. He's got traits. Like that to me seems like a day 3 type of like floor to be drafted because we've seen it.
Yeah, like a guy like Skylar Thompson who played at Kansas State who didn't put up the numbers but has similar like body type,
Mm-hmm.
a little thin, 6'2", but a productive college player. Like if he's drafted, I don't understand why Luke Altmaier wouldn't be drafted. And I think Luke's got the chance to really ascend, right? There's always quarterbacks that kind of surprise people with good years, and I think he's in for a good year.
I'm with you. I like that group. I was trying to decide if there was a wild card or 2 to put in to that conversation. If I had to pick one, it's like Matthew Bailey could be a wild card.
Yeah.
But that also feels like another draft away.
Yeah. But he could be a 4th-year guy that if he has a big enough year, maybe he does make that leap. Like I don't think Josh McCray gets drafted, but a big year could put him in the mix. Like Josh Krutz will probably a little undersized, but Doug Kramer got drafted. Josh Geske's big, man. He's played a lot. So, yeah, I mean, next year, you think about if Leon Lowry has a big year. Well, James Thompson. I didn't even mention James Thompson. Oh, man. Maybe that's
your number, buddy.
5.5 would be what I'd set the number at. But, yeah, I mean, this is probably going to be of the modern draft era where it's 7 rounds. This has a chance. I think 2001 or 2002 was really high up there. Like this one has the chance to be that, which is why you think this could be a really good year for Illinois because they got a lot of NFL guys, a lot of depth of them.
Yeah, and like we say that, had J.C. Davis jumped, had Melvin Priestley jumped, then same number of players, but you just spread out a little bit over 2 drafts. I think like someone like Dylan Roziak's going to find his way into a camp, right? Like we don't need to go down.
Glad you mentioned him.
There's a lot of possibilities, man. That's all I'm saying. There's a lot of possibilities sitting out there. Matthew Bailey would be my wild card of all wild cards in terms of finding his way into that group because he played such good ball down the stretch of the season.
All right, this was fun. It was fun to talk about football and not think about basketball for about 75 minutes here. And appreciate
chat was awesome. The chat was great.
Awesome. The chat played the game of not thinking about basketball for this, so we appreciate you guys all on our YouTube channel here. Hit that like button, subscribe to us. Excuse me, I just lost my voice there. Subscribe to us, hit that notifications bell. We appreciate you guys, all your support. Def, thanks for all the super chats, buddy. We appreciate you. If you're listening on the podcast, give us a follow, rating, review, wherever you get your podcast. We got plenty at IlliniInquirer.com. Of course, Derek Piper's keeping you updated on basketball. Has a what it means about Ty Rodgers returning, so go check that out. I have the biggest needs remaining in the class of 2026. We got plenty more coming up on Illinois football and recruiting coming up this weekend as well. So for Joey Wagner, I'm Jeremy Werner. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer Podcast.